Carlos Nelson with What's Up Kansas City, and we have a really special guest today. Who do we have here?
What's up, Kansas City? My name is Andrea. I wear several hats around here, but three of them are I work with Barraza African Culture Center. We do training in Kansas City, cultural proficiency, equity, inclusion. I work with Indigenous to Indigenous, and we develop projects in Africa, such as solar energy, clean water, agriculture. But today, I'm very excited to be here to talk about the Kansas City Ethnic Enrichment Commission. I serve as the alternate commissioner for Kenya, as well as the commission's outreach director. So I thank you for inviting me here today.
All right. Tell our audience a little bit about what you do and how you go about doing it.
Well, I think the Ethnic Enrichment Commission is probably one of the best kept secrets in Kansas City. We have been around since 1976. The commission was originally formed during the bicentennial to represent the city's heritage and did a parade and a few things. And they did a historical piece that actually won some national awards for the bicentennial. But it was after that that the mayor decided, you know what, hey, this was a really good thing, and it helped the community of Kansas City in recognizing our diversity and our heritage. So it was formally put together out of the mayor's office in 1978. And we have been working since then, and we now represent over 60 nations, hundreds of cultures, and our job really is to share culture and our purpose, our ethnicity in Kansas City, but it's also about cultural heritage and preserving that, but developing that deeper appreciation and understanding across our metro area, and with the recognition of what people from other countries have contributed to our community. And, you know, all of us, unless we are Native American, we've all come from somewhere, and we're all doing something to contribute, just recognizing that.
Do you think most of the people, switching gears a little bit, behind all the stress and strife that's going on today, I think you put it in really good words, unless you're a native, that our society has been made up of this hodgepodge of cultures here in the United States, and that's the message that I get when I come to your festival.
That's a very good part of the message, not excluding Native Americans. We do have an American Indian Commission. And as you know, we all know, there's been issues with the people that have come to this country and how it has impacted Native American populations. So that it's, in some ways, there's a lot of parallels, and there's a need to recognize and appreciate all of the cultures that are here. And yes, you come to the festival and you get a chance to talk to people from all corners of the world. You can eat foods from everywhere. Some of them you might not be able to find in Kansas City outside of the festival. And you have, from the opening to closing, there's entertainment that mostly is local people and local groups that are here and wanting to help preserve their culture. And they teach their children some of those performances and bring them to share them with Kansas City.
I think that, speaking on that, I think that, as I said, we're a hodgepodge. We have drawn, when you talk about Americana, we have drawn from quite a few of those cultures, holidays, food dishes, religious aspects, and I don't think that the average person really sees that.
No, and I like you pointing out that, because it kind of alludes to how important it is to understand and have an awareness of these things, because we are all enjoying the best of many cultures in our everyday lives, and we look at it as American and normal, but we owe those things to world and different people who have brought those things to us. It enriches us in ways that we don't even realize until we start trying to understand and educate ourselves a little bit more about not only other cultures, but it informs us about our own culture.
All right. I want to talk a little bit about Kenya because that's, have you been to Kenya?
I used to live in Kenya. When I graduated from high school, no, not high school, college, I was in my senior year of college. I had lived out of the country previously. I'd lived in Taiwan teaching English. And my friend that I went to Taiwan with, she was a major in another building, but she showed up down at my building one day and said, "Hey, do you want to go teach high school in Kenya?" And so I said, "Sure, let's go."
What college did you go to, by the way?
That was the University of Utah. I'm a Ute.
All right, all right.
But
With our past president coming, having some lineage in Kenya,
yes,
Barack, what was Kenya like? Talk to our audience about Africa in general, because I think a lot of people have a misconception about Africa. They see dirt roads and they see poverty per se, and from my perspective, that's the only thing that you see in the Western media, and the reality is a little different.
you are so right in that. And I do think the Western media perpetuates a very skewed, very narrow, one end of the spectrum view of Africa. And part of that is, there's a lot of organizations here that make a living off of doing charitable work in Africa. So if they can keep perpetuating that idea of Africa being so needy, they stay in business. But I can tell you that when I was in Africa, I saw the whole gamut. I have been in homes in Africa and buildings and facilities that are nicer and more modern than anything I've experienced here. Where I lived when I taught high school, yes, there was no electricity, there was no paved roads, there was no running water, but there was a very rich culture and a very vibrant community, which was very supportive. And, I was there as an educator, but I honestly learned more than I was able to teach. And not only learned about Africa, but I learned about myself in the process. And, the people were so warm and welcoming.
That was the next thing I was going to ask you. How friendly are the people that I've been to Africa, but how friendly where you were? How friendly were the people?
Extremely friendly. And part of that tied into the fact that I was there to help with education in the area, and the value for education is huge. Most of my students lived in mud huts. They didn't have electricity, so if they were home in the evening trying to study, they would study by candlelight. But at school we had, I don't know if you've been camping, in those pressure lamps that you have to pump, the kerosene lamps, that we had those at school. So students would walk an hour home, eat dinner, and walk an hour back to the school to study under better light. And the headmaster would have to kick him out at 10 o'clock at night because he'd say, "You guys need to get some sleep so you're not tired when you get back here in the morning." So
how do you feel, and you've said that, but I want you to be a little more explicit about the culture and the mindset as it relates to education, because I think off camera, I told you I've traveled the world per se, and education is key in most countries. America has really fallen off on, and I'm not bashing America because I'm an American, has fallen off on education. A lot of different countries, the kids and the population, they might speak 2 or 3 different languages, where Americans expect everybody to speak English no matter where we go.
And sometimes we don't even do a very good job of speaking English. But you're so right.
Ebonics guy.
Well, that means you speak at least 2 languages. But in Kenya, the official language is English, thanks to the British colonization that occurred there. and I say thanks in quotes there, it's not necessarily a positive thing. The national language, yes, the national language is Swahili, but each area there is a different tribe. There's 60 languages spoken in Kenya. People have their mother tongue, they speak English, they speak Swahili, and some of the others. So if you meet a Kenyan, they probably speak at least 3 languages, at least.
Mm.
And it makes a big difference. And they've shown in education and in science that the more languages you speak, the more connected your brain becomes, the better you are at problem solving, the better you are at adapting to things. So we're looking at people because of that, that are very talented, very capable, very smart. And a lot of times they just need the opportunity. So that's why they're.
It seems like the continent, it seems like to me, a lot of the, excuse me. A lot of the kids, they want to become doctors and engineers and things of that, and teachers. How many behind you teaching that you feel looked at you as a role model and wanted to follow in your footsteps?
Many students say that their dream was to become a teacher. And what was interesting, it makes me think of one of my students who, I went there as a college graduate, and I had a student who was actually older than I was, because in secondary school there you have to pay fees. So if there were times when they couldn't afford the fees, they would drop out of school, try to earn some money to get the fee money together and come back. So I had one student who was actually older than me, whose dream was to one day be a teacher at that school. A lot of times there's a lot of challenges, because when you go to college and university, there's a national test to get in there, and then there were fewer spots than there were students who wanted to attend. So it was very competitive and very hard to be able to do those things, but they knew that education was their key.
Has there been what is the migration rate or that of Kenyans coming to the United States, if you know, per se?
It has grown over the years, and I could talk also about Kansas City. I don't think people
know my next question.
Blessed we are in Kansas City with the various immigrant groups and refugee groups that are here. But if you look at foreign-born people in Kansas City and you look at them by country, most people could guess that Mexico has the largest population of Mexican-born people here. Kenya is actually number 9 on the list. So the 9th most.
Do you know by heart what the order? If you could run that down for our Kansas City audience.
I would have to look that one up.
Right.
I think number 2 was India, and we have a lot of Indian people there, especially. And India, like a lot of them are working in healthcare and other services like that. So we always joke. There's a movie, A Day Without a Mexican, where and it's about California. If all the people that of Mexican descent would what would happen? Kind of the same thing here with Kenyans and the healthcare system, and a lot of the Africans and other immigrants. Without them, our healthcare system would collapse. And during this time of COVID-19, these were the people who are on the front lines that were protecting all of us and helping all of us. But I don't think they get the recognition they should for the sacrifices that they're making, both themselves and their families.
What's the other country that you represent?
Well, I'm the alternate commissioner for Kenya. We have 66 countries represented on the commission.
No, I'm saying you personally. You said, or was it just Kenya you deal
It's
with?
just has one country, and then, but there's a lot of different international organizations here. I am also part of the Kansas City Sister Cities Association. I serve on the Arusha, Tanzania committee there. And one of the things all of these organizations are looking for is for people to get involved. So there's people in Kansas City that have any sort of interest in some of these things. There are ways to really be involved with people here in Kansas City, as well as having this global experience.
Tell me this. We're talking about the ethnic commission, but the other group that your husband heads up. You alluded to that when we first opened up. Tell our audience a little bit about that also.
There's two. One is more Kansas City facing, which is Barraza African Culture Center. Barraza works with a lot of the international and global organizations in Kansas City. Right now, we're very much working on the planning for World Refugee Day, which is June 20th. We do that in conjunction with JVS, Della Lamb, which are the Missouri side refugee resettlement agencies, but we have Truman Hospital, Samuel Rogers, the Public Library, the Ethnic Enrichment Commission is also a co-sponsor. But we're on there looking at two things. One, to show refugees in Kansas City that they are welcomed and an appreciated part of our community. The other part of that, which ties more into the Barraza African Culture Center mission, is an educational component to help people in Kansas City, one, recognize the diversity we have, but beyond recognition, kind of understand and be able to appreciate what that does for all of us in our community. And then of course it starts going into equity and inclusion issues, which as we've seen, especially recently, are not just our country, the world has some difficulties with equity and inclusion. So one of the things Barraza does is works with organizations, nonprofits, corporations, churches, schools, anyone on, how do we educate ourselves in a way that we can become culturally proficient, so we understand what culture does and what cultural influences are, what is culturally defined, but also, then how then can we appreciate things and make sure that our systems and our organizations, everything are open, that people can equally access goods and resources.
Cutting you off a little bit, do you think that what you're doing in that realm should be put into the educational system here?
The
culture.
Quick answer is yes.
Yeah.
We do work with a lot of schools. Mm-hmm. And because a lot of the issues and a lot of racism and some of those things are also learned. And a lot of these things are learned at a young age. So if we could get at a young age, getting a little better understanding of how to think about and approach culture and difference, I think it would do the world a lot of good. I do know a lot of the districts are making efforts in that direction, but if you're the diversity and inclusion person at a district and you're working with however many schools with however many teachers who went through teaching programs that didn't teach them how to teach kids those things, it's a huge task.
Right, a yeoman's task. Where are you located at?
We well, if you're talking about Barraza African Culture Center, we are located online. We're virtual. We our headquarters is in Lenexa, but we do all of our trainings. We go to people to do the trainings. So we like to do things on site where people are. In part, there's a comfort level, which I think is important, that you have to have. A lot of times, especially if you have some diversity in the room, you bring up a topic like race and people get nervous, people get scared, people get defensive. So we like to go to people, and so they're in a more comfortable environment. Plus, when we walk out, they're in the environment where they've learned that and have to practice those things. So we do a lot of our trainings on site.
Why don't you give our audience the website that they can contact the organization if they have it in their hearts to want to participate and volunteer?
Love to. Our website is www.barraza, which is BARAZA.org.
All right. now let's get switch gears again. Let's get back on to the Ethnic Enrichment Commission.
I'll change my
Right on. Normally, people might not be familiar with the commission's title, but most people in Kansas City are really familiar with that festival held at Swope Park. I can remember the first time I seen that, and I was like, "What the heck is going on over there?" And when I entered and walked through all the different stalls, that's a yeoman's task, putting that together, because I had some affiliation with a Russian. She had Russian art in Kansas City. Now it's European art. And that introduced me to some other things. And putting something like that together is monumental. And I think that's a gem of Kansas City, personally.
I would agree with you 100%. And first, I want to say we are really brokenhearted that we had to cancel it for this year. We did feel that it was the responsible thing to do, both for the people in our organization that work and put it on, but also for the public coming there. We wanted to make sure we took care of people first. But as far as the task at hand, yes, it happens the third full weekend in August every year, except this year. Last year was our 40th.
And how many days is it?
It starts Friday evening and goes all day Saturday, and Sunday until 6 in the evening. But we start on that as soon as we pack it up in August. We are hitting it hard again September to get things moving. And we have an army of people, which I don't know if most people realize, all volunteer. And everybody on the Ethnic Enrichment Commission is volunteer. And everybody, all the commissioners that represent countries have some sort of organization behind them, which is probably a nonprofit organization representing a certain culture group. And they are all volunteers. So it is an army of volunteers that it takes to put this together.
Those are special type of people in today's money. And because I deal with a lot of different things. And the first thing one was, well, how am I going to be paid?
That unfortunately is often the very first question. I mean, I don't mind if people get compensation they're due for their work, but the mission needs to always be first. And people do, if you come to the festival, you'll buy food, you'll buy other things. There is a small fee to get in. That money, though, all goes to these nonprofit organizations that are putting it on. So the people are still volunteering, but it does really help these organizations keep operating and keep bringing what they do to Kansas City.
Does the U.S. have a stall there?
Well, we have an African American stall. We have the American Indian stall. Right. And then Hawaii also has a stall.
But the overall U.S. hasn't put one together.
No, I think it's in part, even though there is a predominant culture here in the U.S., a lot of it is about, the different groups that have come to contribute to making that overall culture. So it's about the groups that are bringing things in that are ingredients in that.
Yeah. And how would one get in touch with your organization that would want to get involved in the Enrichment Festival and work with the commission?
Mm-hmm. And you have to go through a commission to participate. Only commission members can have a booth there, but some of our members maybe don't have a booth, or they have somebody from the community that does the booth for them. You can go to the eeckc.org website or call
EEC. With that's an acronym. What does that stand for?
Ethnic Enrichment Commission.
All right.
Or you can give a call in any of the commissioners, our office. The city is very generous in supporting us in some ways. They give.
How about the county?
We're talking KCMO. We're out of the mayor's office, KCMO. But we do have a person that works in our office part-time who is paid. So she helps us keep everything running and going. So it's very helpful. And they work out of the Parks and Recs department.
We just had Parks and Rec on the show, the head of Parks and Rec, and then we had their community. I meant to say their communications person on about 2 weeks ago, because we have the beautiful parks here in Kansas City, mm-hmm. and they probably play a big part in that festival, especially the cleanup.
That festival would not happen if we did not have our relationship with Parks and Rec. They bring teams of people in that help through that. We also have a liaison from the Parks and Rec that meets with the commission. She's 100% in there with us. She is one of the leads on putting the festival together as far as making sure things happen. But if it weren't for the people at Parks and Rec, and I mean,
well, you know, they under new leadership over the last 2 years, Terry Renard, and I really like her. She is inclusive in her thinking, and I think that they're making great strides over there at Parks and Rec to provide the services that Kansas City residents need.
Yes, although I won't take away anything from the effort of the commissioners and the members of the commission, we would not have a festival without the support of Parks and Rec. It just couldn't happen.
All right, and winding up, Ms. Khan, what would your parting words be to our audience?
Well, you know, we are in such a crazy time right now with so many things going on. I mean, we're still dealing with a pandemic that has impacted the entire globe. And although each of us are kind of impacted by the same things, we're not impacted always in the same way. And some of those differences go down to socioeconomics, race, ethnicity, nationality. And then on top of it, you know, all the protests and riots that are going on right now points to some very deep wounds that we have, not only as a country, but those issues are also existing globally. I do think it's our responsibility here to address what is going on in our country. But the only way I think that can happen is through having some better dialogue, knowing what is important and how we treat and deal with people, and not being blinded by a lot of the privileges that we have. We have to be open-minded and be able to learn from others' perspectives and others' experiences. I'm not saying you have to love everybody or love everything or be open to everything, but you need to look at those things with educated eyes and with an open heart, because then you can actually, instead of just being discriminating against things, you can choose some discrimination where you can say, okay, I understand this. This is why this is happening. And I use the word understand there also in quotes, because we can never truly understand another's perspective, but we can learn from their perspective. And I think we very much need to be doing that right now, because some people are upset by some of the graffiti, the other things that have gone on through these protests. But if you have lived a life that every day, every step you take is a challenge just because of your skin color, and people are dying just because of their skin color, we white people can't get upset when a building is burned, because you can't compare that building burning to lives being lost and entire lives being spent with obstacles that shouldn't be in people's way. So again, just the open heart, open mind, and get educated. Talk to somebody that's different than you, learn from them, and you will become a better person because of it. I guarantee you.
No doubt about that. Well, it was a pleasure having you on What's Up Kansas City, and this is going to translate to our What's Up Worldwide network also. And Cascade Media Group, we look forward to working with your commission and working with you personally. And we left out one thing. How are we going to do this year's festival? We talked
Oh,
about
yes.
yeah. Let's
We're
read it real quick.
looking at being creative just like everybody else, and kind of like this, what we're doing right now, these virtual things where we can still stay connected. We are looking at both for our outreach that we normally do and for our festival of doing some virtual things so we can still be sharing with Kansas City, the performances, the education. So we are working diligently on with each of our groups on how is it we can still have a festival and perhaps this way be able to reach even more people that can, I run into people all the time saying, oh, I've wanted to go to that, or I couldn't go to it because I had this. This way, it's a way that I think we can actually reach more people, at least this year, with some of what Kansas City has. We said the festival is a real gem. Each of these groups that will be contributing to this, I think people will be delighted in learning about them, seeing what they do, and learning from them. So we're looking at a virtual festival. Don't quite know exactly the shape it's all going to take, but we are working on that.
All right. It was a pleasure having you on the show, and we look forward to working with you in the near future.
It's my honor, my pleasure. Thank you. I also look forward to that.
The program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.